Thank you very much, Simon. I appreciate that very generous introduction, and I appreciate all the work that you and NDN have been doing to build attention to the importance of trade, of digital trade, of the unique opportunity for American leadership. And so thank you for that. I also want to thank JD and Congressman Kind for their strong support around what we're doing to focus on digital trade, why it matters for America, and particularly Congressman Kind's involvement with the New Democrat Coalition. Really their American prosperity agenda recognizes this unique time and role for America as a leader in innovation, but how we maintain and build on that leadership for our next generation. So thank you very much for that. And I also thought that given the long history that Simon and NDN have focused on this and the support of Congressman Kind and his colleagues, that there was really no better place than here and today to talk about the values that we're seeking to promote, the goals of what we're promoting around digital trade, to speak about them perhaps more comprehensively than they have been typically talked about, and to talk about why President Obama sees this as a fundamental part of his trade agenda, and what we can do and what we need to do comprehensively to bring this forward as we talk about 21st century leadership. So I want to talk about digital trade, and in the title for this presentation, I wanted to call it, and I called it the 21st century leadership imperative. And I think that's the right word because we stand at a crossroad. The rules that we have put in place in the international trading system, historically championed by the United States, I will add, have served us well so far. They've helped enable the explosive growth of the internet and the dissemination of new technology. They've led to rapid changes that have brought us closer together. They've allowed us to trade across borders, and they've enabled some of the world's greatest innovations to emanate from our shores. However, as someone who has worked at this intersection of technology and international trade for over 2 decades, I can speak with confidence when I say this. The trading rules that helped us get to where we are today are no longer sufficient. They're no longer sufficient in light of the seismic change in the way technology is evolving. They're no longer sufficient in the face of new barriers that are being erected. Barriers that, if allowed to proliferate, will stand in the way of innovation and impede the ability for U.S. innovators to succeed in the digital future as they have in the digital past. So one of the most important aspects of President Obama's overall 21st century trade agenda is centered on the digital economy and digital trade. And I'm glad to sort of put a little perspective on why this is important now and what we have proposed to help make this a reality. So I'm going to talk in a few minutes, and we have some handouts about what I'm going to describe as our digital dozen. And before I get into that, I want to make it clear that we are also negotiating many more disciplines in our trade agreements to support the free flow of goods, services, and data across the internet. But the dozen rules that I'll describe today are really building on other fundamentals of the agreements we're negotiating. And collectively, they'll help ensure that the digital economy and the internet remain as central to America's competitiveness and prosperity in the next 20 years as they have been in the past 20. The principles that we're looking at today are designed to secure not only our ability to compete in the 21st century digital economy, but also the very parameters of that economy itself. And our digital agenda is designed to answer questions such as, Will the internet continue to remain open, accessible, and free? Will the internet drive growth as powerfully in the next 20 years as it did in the last 20? Will the internet continue to create opportunities for small businesses to deliver high-quality healthcare and financial services to rural areas and marginalized people, and continue to fulfill its promise to lift people up out of poverty and oppression? Or will it become fractious and balkanized, disintegrating into regional and national networks that our farmers, exporters, creators, and innovators can only access for an exacting price? Now, to get the right answers, we must be sure that the global trade rules continue to have a key role in protecting the free flow of information that's at the foundation of the digital economy. However, the current rules date to the 1990s and have growing gaps. Gaps that need to be filled to meet the needs of citizens who are now connected across the globe with a proliferation of mobile devices. Gaps that need to be filled to support emerging business models based on interconnected information networks. And gaps that need to be filled in light of the protectionist policies that threaten to break up the internet and impede the flow of goods, services, and data around the world. So that's the challenge as we see it, and that's the challenge that we're seeking to solve. Now, let's look back for a moment to the last major shift in trade rules. And that was a shift that happened at the time the parties to the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade created the WTO and updated the rules that would govern trade in goods and services. That shift took place in 1995, obviously a generation ago, and at a time before the internet was of critical commercial significance and cross-border digital trade barely existed. In 1995, only 45 million people had access to the internet. Last year, that figure was 3 billion. In 1995, Amazon and eBay were launched, but widespread adoption of e-commerce remained a thing of the future. Last year, Amazon sold a record 2 billion items worldwide online, and eBay accounted for $225 billion in commerce. In 1995, there were no tablets, smartphones, or similar devices available at all. Now there are over 12 billion of them. In 1995, the founders of Facebook were pretty much still in grade school, and the founders of YouTube in high school. The words social and media were rarely encountered together. Today, Facebook has 1.4 billion active users, 83% of whom live outside the United States, and YouTube has 1 billion users located in 75 countries, available in 61 languages. So what we know is the internet has brought us closer together, and I think importantly, it's had significant democratizing effects. But the internet has also had a transformative effect on our economy. It's transformed the products and goods and services we buy, how we buy them, and dramatically reduced the cost of moving products and services across borders. In fact, I think one of the most compelling assessments of the internet's impact comes from the OECD. And the OECD asserted that the overall impact of the internet and IT on global productivity may surpass that of any other technology in history, including electricity and the combustion engine. So at the request of Congress a couple of years ago, the U.S. International Trade Commission issued 2 recent reports on e-commerce and digital commerce. And so whether we measure this broadly or simply by the volume of products and services that are ordered or delivered over the internet at its most narrow level, or at its most comprehensive, as industries in which internet-based technologies play a significant role, the ITC concluded that digital economy has had a profound effect in terms of our growth and the way we operate. Total online sales, according to the ITC, of products and services in digitally intensive sectors was $935 billion, or 6.3% of total US GDP in 2012. According to the ITC, digital trade has caused real wages to increase by 4.5% to 5% and increased US aggregate employment by up to 1.8%. And the internet has reduced the cost of trade for US exporters and importers in digitally intensive sectors by 26% on average. And importantly, it's not just technology companies that benefit from these reduced trade costs. According to McKinsey, more than 3/4 of the value created by the internet accrues to traditional industries. In 2012, our manufacturers exported $86.5 billion in products and services ordered online. They imported about $50.7 billion in goods and services online. And so we have a $36 billion digital trade surplus in this area alone. And what we're trying to do is seeking to expand that across a range of trade agreements in ways that do so not only for the benefit of tech companies and manufacturers, but for companies and workers in every sector of the economy. Internet-enabled and digital technologies have driven developments of global data networks. These are networks that foster economic development, networks that enhance agricultural production and advance environmental protection, networks that protect health and safety throughout the world. For example, when we consider the developmental impact of the internet, take, for example, a platform like Kiva, which is the world's largest online platform for microlending. Kiva has facilitated $700 million in microloans to more than 1.5 million people in 190 countries. Look at crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter and Patreon that have also democratized access to capital for projects of all sizes. Digital technologies and data flows are central to new ways of transforming agriculture, both in the developing world and here at home. Take West Africa and shea nut harvesters. They use their mobile applications to scan and protect the shea nut products that they are exporting, as well as transmitting pricing and market information to buyers all over the world. In this increasingly internet-enabled world, this has enabled these farmers to both increase their output and their income, and that's resulted in more jobs. Here at home, the internet has enabled our growers to move into smart planting by combining data on crop spacing and yields with information on weather patterns and crop performance. Eventually, farmers all over the world will have access to this type of smart planting technology, and that could significantly improve global food security and rapidly feed growing populations whose needs for food cannot be served and met by current means. And perhaps most fundamentally, the internet has had a dramatic impact on the explosion of the information and communications technology sector in the US and around the world. And indeed, the ICT sector today is orders of magnitude bigger than it was 20 years ago, and includes a much more diverse set of players. And these are players and companies that develop hardware, software, smartphones, content, applications, networking, cybersecurity, and support services. Companies like Apple, IBM, Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Facebook are all now global leaders. And companies all around the world depend on the digital products and services that they currently provide. And importantly, We have new emerging competitors every day coming out of tech incubators, out of universities and labs. We have faster and more democratized innovation coming about through new affordable access to the massive computing power through the cloud. And then that allows innovators to scale up quickly, whether they're located in Boston, Austin, La Crosse, or San Jose. So the sum total of this innovation that's really been fueled by the internet and now the cloud cannot be overestimated. Again, in a 2011 study, McKinsey estimated that the internet contributed almost a 21% increase in GDP in mature economies during the period of 2006 to 2011. The National Foreign Trade Council reported that goods, services, and content flowing over the internet during the same 5-year period of time was responsible for a 15% growth in US GDP. Those are big numbers and big growth, and it's all the more striking given that the span that they looked at was the span that encompassed the Great Recession. So simply put, the internet and broadband networks have transformed our global economy by establishing an open platform for delivering information-intensive products and services instantly. And they have enabled the emergence of an almost seamless global marketplace. So when the key global trading partners last set about renegotiating the rules of the global trade system, the internet was indeed in its infancy, and digital trade was indeed virtually non-existent. Digital delivery of services was extremely limited. And while the transformative nature of the internet could not have been fully foreseen at that time, trade agreements from 20 years ago, particularly the General Agreement on Trade and Services, or the GATS, incorporated several key concepts that have enabled the digital economy to prosper and prosper across borders. In 1995, the GATS parties agreed to cover all internationally traded services, including banking, telecommunications, computer, tourism, professional services, and others. The GATS parties agreed further that their commitments in each of these areas were to be technology neutral. In other words, they could not depend and would not depend on the means by which the services were provided. And this technology neutrality obligation ensured that many of the commitments taken by the GATS parties remain meaningful today. For example, China's GATS commitment to offer non-discriminatory market access to music distributors would be of little use if it were not tech neutral, as the distribution and sale of musical content has migrated increasingly to digital platforms in recent years. Additionally, the WTO members recognize the importance of ensuring the free flow of data in two sector-specific annexes to the GATS. They committed to ensure that service providers of members could use public telecommunication systems for the movement of information across borders and to access information contained in databases or stored electronically in the territory of another party. Similarly, the GATS parties committed to refrain from adopting measures to prevent the transfer of processing of financial information, including by cross-border data transfer and through electronic means, again, in telecommunications and financial services. And so these were important obligations at the time because these were industries that historically relied on gathering, processing, and analyzing customer information from regional centers and whose businesses depend on reliable access to communications networks. But of course, much has changed through the digital economy, and much has changed since those obligations undertaken 20 years ago. The digital economy has developed in broad ways which companies and individuals alike are even more dependent on cross-border data flows. Look at just the proliferation of mobile devices over the past several years. The World Bank estimated that by July 2012, about 3/4 of the world's inhabitants had access to a mobile phone. In fact, the number of mobile subscriptions in use worldwide had grown from fewer than 1 billion in 2000 to over 6 billion by 2012. 5 billion of those were in developing countries. And I'm sure many of you may have seen the recent cover story of The Economist that heralded that by 2020, 80% of adults will have an internet-enabled phone or a supercomputer in their pocket. So as mobile service providers and digitally intensive industries expand internationally, they seek to maximize their economies of scale by processing and storing their data in locations across their entire geographical network. For example, a service provider supporting a smartphone might access data stored in the United States and Japan when serving a customer in Korea. Similarly, a bank in Singapore might give its employees access to software hosted in the United States to better market its products. However, what we see is that many countries have embraced a form of data nationalism that threatens to prevent this kind of expansion. They use data localization requirements that they put in place so that data has to be stored and processed locally, and we see that trend growing in foreign markets. Indeed, USTR's research has indicated that we've identified at least 20 countries that have considered or adopted measures that would require data localization of some kind. And in their most egregious form, such policies would require a company to build data centers in country in order to serve that market, often at a cost of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And such requirements also fundamentally undermine a key advantage of new cloud computing services, which leverage the economies of scale of a reduced number of computing centers to provide cheaper and often more secure data processing and storage services. So Ron Wyden, who is certainly active in looking at threats that face the technology environment, has talked about the pernicious impact of data nationalism. As he said recently, repressive regimes in Russia, China, and elsewhere are conspiring to build walls around the internet that cut off the flow of information at national borders. He went on to say that even democratic regimes with a lesser history of honoring free speech than the US are proposing unacceptable restrictions on the internet. So these type of localization requirements are beginning to balkanize the internet. And barriers like these have the potential to hit at the heart of the digital economy and indeed to nullify many of the internet's trade facilitating effects. And barriers to digital trade come not just in the form of data localization requirements, but also market access limitations. Things like IPR infringement, inflexible data privacy and protection requirements, and uncertain legal liability rules, among others. Indeed, the ITC's econometric models estimated that by removing these barriers, that could generate and increase U.S. real GDP in the range of tens of billions of dollars for U.S. suppliers. Now, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, or TPP, the United States has proposed additional rules in telecommunications, e-commerce, investment, and intellectual property in those chapters to combat these trends that harm the digital economy. And these rules draw on extensive consultations we've had with Congress and key stakeholders that were meant to identify barriers to digital trade, both existing and potential. And they used and were used as the means by which we developed a comprehensive trade policy in this area. And so I refer to these as our digital dozen, and collectively they're the most high standard and comprehensive combination of pioneering disciplines to promote an open internet and an internet-enabled economy in any trade agreement in history. Let me quickly walk through these. First, the internet should remain free and open. We're working with our trading partners to affirm the bedrock principle that consumers should be able to access online content and applications of choice for all legitimate commercial purposes. And in our trade rules, we focus on commercial suppliers, but this principle also has broad benefits for social and civic engagement. Second, we proposed a complete prohibition on customs duties for digital products. And this will ensure that our trading partners cannot erect customs toll booths that would impede the flow of music, video, software, ebooks, and games throughout the trade area. It'll ensure that our creators, artists, and entrepreneurs get a fair shake in markets around the world. Third, we propose that our trading partners refrain from putting any digital products of another party at a competitive disadvantage in their markets. With this, we've ensured that basic non-discrimination principles that are at the core of the global trading system for goods and services also apply to digital products. Fourth, as I've described, barriers to cross-border data flows threaten to destroy the considerable benefits associated with cloud computing and innovative technologies. Therefore, we're acting directly to confront these discriminatory and protectionist barriers to cross-border data flows that many countries are enacting. These rules are subject, of course, to reasonable safeguards that countries put in place to ensure things like the protection of consumer data when exported. Fifth, we proposed rules preventing our trading partners from forcing companies to localize their computing facilities or to build expensive data centers in every market they seek to serve. And this will ensure that digitally intensive companies can fully utilize their existing networks and process their data efficiently and cost-effectively. Sixth, we proposed rules prohibiting our trading partners from requiring companies to transfer their technology, production processes, or other proprietary information to persons in their respective parties and territories. Seventh, we've sought to include binding commitments ensuring technology choice that prohibit our partners from requiring companies to purchase and utilize local technology. Our objective here is to ensure that companies operating within the trade area can use technology of their own choosing, for example, preserving their ability to choose among wireless transmission standards like Wi-Fi or LTE. Eighth, we proposed a provision which ensures that companies and consumers can develop and use technology-neutral electronic signatures and authentication methods of their own choice. Ninth, we propose that our partners provide enforceable consumer protections in their markets so baseline consumer trust is enhanced. We believe that consumer protections, including with respect to privacy, should be embraced by our trading partners. 10th, we have proposed provisions to safeguard network competition. We've long championed the ability of our suppliers to build networks in markets they serve, whether landing submarine cables or expanding data and voice networks to better serve customers and businesses. 11th, we've introduced a provision that aims to foster the development of innovative and effective encryption products to meet consumer and business demand for products that provide better security and better privacy. We've also sought to prevent countries from taking actions that stifle innovation and block companies from using the strongest available security technologies in the marketplace. And 12th, we proposed an adaptable platform for our services and investment commitments to ensure that new and innovative digital products and services are protected from discrimination and other barriers. And the upshot of this approach is that the services and investment commitments we negotiate will extend to entirely new business models and services that emerge. unless a specific negotiated exception from now applies. So there you have it, what we would describe and I would describe as our digital dozen. And they really reflect the Obama administration's decision to play a leadership role in developing the global legal framework to support the digital economy. Now, of course, TPP also contains dozens and dozens of additional disciplines around things like intellectual property, services, financial services, investment, telecommunications, and small and medium enterprise chapters, all of which will support a digital economy. For example, we know that IP infringement, in particular, is a huge concern for content producers and right holders operating in foreign markets. And what we found in the United States is that IP protections do not simply benefit rights holders, they have a ripple effect on the entire economy. In fact, IP protections have led to the development of the most innovative internet-enabled products and services in the world today, from the content on Netflix to the software on Adobe's cloud. Therefore, in the IP chapter, the United States has proposed a strong and balanced legal framework for intellectual property rights protection to promote the dissemination of content while at the same time reducing obstacles to the development of new technologies and business models. More specifically, we've sought to advance existing global IP standards by insisting upon provisions to protect against the theft of trade secrets, whether that theft occurs by cyber means or otherwise. We've proposed anti-circumvention provisions that are used by both traditional content companies as well as new digital content and service providers. And we've sought internet service provider safe harbors aligned with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And we see this as valuable to the digital economy. But our proposals also provide space for policymakers to adapt to new technological developments when necessary in the public interest. Additionally, as a complement to the copyright protection and enforcement commitments, the U.S. is also supporting provisions for the first time in any trade agreement that will promote balance in copyright systems through exceptions and limitations for legitimate purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research, including in the digital environment. Now, before we move to our broader discussion and questions, I want to stop at this point, but I also want to say a few words about the 2015 Bipartisan Congressional Trade Priority and Accountability Act, TPA 2015. Importantly, the 2015 TPA bill very much reflects Congress's desire to ensure that the trade agreements the Obama administration and future administrations negotiate recognize the importance of the internet as a fundamental international trading platform. It also provides specific negotiating objectives to secure cross-border data flows, non-discriminatory treatment of digital products, and to combat mandatory directives for local storage and processing of data. Now, these objectives go well beyond the negotiating objectives around e-commerce that were part of the 2002 TPA statute. And they reflect the challenges we face today, the needs of 21st century internet users, and the evolving technology architecture of a mobile social network world. And so, as I have sought to demonstrate today, the rules included in our digital dozen are designed to accomplish the objectives that Congress has identified. Furthermore, the Obama administration believes that the principles we are espousing will become key components of the 21st century global trading system. And what we hope, and what I hope, is that when a group like this gathers up here 20 years from now, it's our belief that we can say that the rules that are being negotiated now provided the same opportunities for growth, innovation, and prosperity that enable our digital future to be even brighter than our digital past. Thank you.